The Trump administration has been fighting aggressively to include a citizenship question in the census. And of course, the Supreme Court ruled against it, arguing that the reasoning behind why the Trump administration wanted to do this was not good enough. But they did leave the door open for other potential reasons that would be valid. Well, today, Trump has updated the American people about how the census will not include a citizenship question. And of course, I mean, the Supreme Court had already ruled on this. The administration had no other reason to include that citizenship question. And so remember, we had updated you on how lawyers in the Department of Justice had asked the judge to step down from this case, probably because they realized there was no case, and the judge had actually blocked them from doing so. So I'm a little surprised, I gotta be honest, because this morning it was reported that Trump was going to pursue an executive order to include the citizenship question, but now it appears he has given up. But I do want to let you know that he says he's ordering every federal department and agency to provide the Commerce Department with all records it requests pertaining to the number of citizens and non-citizens in the country. Trump says he will sign an executive order to put this new plan into effect immediately. We'll update you guys on that as the story develops. This just broke, but I want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean that, they could come up with some way that also will be terrible, but I could see him just losing interest in that because that doesn't accomplish the goal. The goal is to get people to not respond to the census, to be too scared to. Now, he got some of what he wanted already because we talked about this a lot in the media and we needed to help get to this point where the Supreme Court ruled against it. But just the conversation being out there is going to scare some people. Some people will be left with the idea that it will be on there. It won't, but they're not gonna find that out and they will be too worried to answer it, so that's unfortunate. So now it's on us to make sure that everyone knows that they can freely answer the census. But the thing for me, there's been this constant back and forth and you never know with Trump what he's going to do, but there was a little bit of dread that I was feeling where you were like, well, there's really no case because the Supreme Court ruled against it, which is true, but if he had just announced today that he was going to do it, then what would have happened? Well, Nancy Pelosi would have kicked down the door and stopped him?
Thank you, John.
I don't even know why he's not doing it. Who would have stopped him?
No, first of all, you made a really great point.
Thank you.
Because I made that point as well. I don't know if we still have that video available. Can you guys give me a thumbs up if we do? Because when we previously covered this story, I brought that up. I brought up how, well, you know what? Why don't we watch the video and you'll see what I said. My line of reasoning on this story had everything to do with the people who continuously enable him in government. Over and over again. The individuals who refuse to hold him accountable for his actions. Yes, that includes Democratic leadership, Nancy Pelosi specifically. If he's told that he's above the law, if he's told he's able to possibly commit crimes with absolutely no repercussions, why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he ignore what the Supreme Court has decided on this case? Why wouldn't he move forward with what he wants? Now, look, this doesn't mean that the question will definitely be included in the census. It means that Trump doesn't want to give up fighting on this. And according to NPR, US District Judge George Hazel is now giving the administration until Friday of this week to decide whether it will enter into a written agreement that confirms it will no longer pursue including this citizenship question in the census. But knowing Trump, he will not agree to that. He will not put that in writing. He will continue with this nonsense, and it's gonna cost us, US taxpayers, quite a bit of money as a result. So I'm happy that he didn't actually pursue the executive order.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, maybe he's worried that our political institutions still have a little bit of strength, a little bit of inertia, that they would fight back against him. But the point that you were making specifically about the census there was my argument now for what feels like a year or two about impeachment, where people who oppose impeachment after seeing what he's done have signed on to the idea that if he does break the law, there shouldn't be any consequences. That is the lesson that was sent to him. And so when he chooses not to, like in this instance, I'm honestly baffled why he didn't just put it on there.
So before we continue with that part of the discussion, can you just talk a little bit more about why it is the Trump administration wanted to include this question, right? Because they would argue, oh, it's gonna help us track undocumented immigrants, as if people are gonna honestly.
Well, the argument, what they actually said was, we need this information so that we can comply with certain components of the Voting Rights Act. So it's not that we're racist, we actually wanna do something that's unracist. And that made it a little bit more obvious that they were lying. The Republican attachment to the Voting Rights Act is not so strong that Donald Trump would make it a multi-year campaign to get on there. Nobody actually believes that, but that's what they said. What they actually want to do is make it so that some people who either are here illegally, don't have documentation, or are worried about being deported won't want to be tracked in something that is explicitly concerning immigration status and citizenship. It doesn't matter to Trump if the Constitution actually says you're just supposed to count the number of people, as we pointed out many times. The idea was that you could scare people off. And then that was why I was saying before, my fear is that just as having had this conversation might leave some people with that fear, even if the actual question isn't present.
So I'm glad you explained that, because as always, the way that the right wing operates is based on projection. So they want to scare people away from actually responding to the census, because they know that in previous administrations, let's say when there's a Democrat in charge, they've been afraid to answer the census. In fact, I came across an old TYT video from back in 2009. Now, I didn't include any of Cenk's commentary, but
thank you.
I did include, you're the worst, but I did include a back and forth between Glenn Beck and Michelle Bachmann, okay? So again, this is in 2009, which makes sense, 10 years ago. And hear what they have to say about the census.
I think there is a point when you say enough is enough to government intrusion. And you had mentioned this earlier, 28 pages. I have the survey right here, Glenn. This is the 28-page survey. This is the short form that every American will get next year. Does the federal government really need to know our phone numbers? Do they really need to know, like you said, the date and time that we leave, mental stability? You know the one question that's not on this survey, Glenn? Are you a US citizen? This would be your perfect opportunity to find out how many illegal aliens are in the United States. Guess what? That's the one question they don't ask on this, your resident status.
Can they, because I've considered not filling it out when I get it, but I want to make sure that they don't use this as a loophole to, say that I can no longer have a permit for my gun, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, so
not doing that.
No, of course they're not doing that. That's not what the purpose. The census is not meant to be like a political or a politically charged document, right? Like, or survey or questionnaire. The whole point of the census is to have an understanding of how many people are in the country, how many people are in various districts. It has to do with allocating federal money based on the population, right? So
and representation.
And
based on the
representation, yes, exactly. So it's not meant to be there's no political motive behind it, but the reason why I show you that old video is because you have a Democrat in charge and they're like fear mongering about like, they're gonna take our guns away, the census is gonna, because they plan to use the census for political purposes.
Yeah, for political purposes, yeah. Yeah, and it's 28 pages, so many, what do they want it to be? Like, you just text everybody in the country, yo you up?
Fit it on an index card.
Yeah, I guess yeah, we need some information. It's used for a lot of things. Some of them not nefarious, but gathering data is a scientific thing, and so naturally they're gonna be a little bit concerned about it. And I think one of the things that's made this discussion a little bit difficult is, it's one thing to say, well, the Constitution is very clear, count the number of people. But I think some, especially considering that political representation is based off of the results of the census, some people who might not be hard right-wingers will say, well, but is that really fair that more representatives will go not based on number of citizens, but based on how many people are there? That doesn't really seem fair. But that's just based on a couple hundred years of this weird attempt to make people think that citizens are the only people that count inside of our borders, or that the US government is designed only to serve the interests of citizens.
Right.
We've always had non-citizens in our country. We designed it that way, actually, in some notable ways that eventually need to be fixed thanks to the Civil War. But the idea that we don't want representatives to only be there for our citizens. If there are a lot of people living in an area, we want the government to function. We want things to work. It doesn't matter if they're not citizens. We want our country to work efficiently.
You're right.
That's a rational way to run a government.
And also keep in mind that if you include a citizenship question in the census, not everyone in a particular household is a citizen, right? But that doesn't mean that everyone in that house is a non-citizen. So it discourages actual American citizens from being counted or responding to the census. So it's not a black or white issue. As always, I mean, American government operates in this weird black and white narrative, and it's nuanced. It's much more complicated than that. And again, this is something that is protected in the Constitution, and you have the Trump administration attempting to politicize it.
And the last quick point I'll make is, so this is good, hurrah. But understand that even before they were attempting to do this, black and brown Americans are already undercounted by the census. So just bear that in mind. It's not like we fixed the one threat to the census and the apportionment of political representation. It's already unfair in the way that it's done. It's complicated. We don't have the fix for it on the show right now, but it's a problem that still needs to be fixed even after we've had this victory.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.